I was 20 the morning my parents told me to leave our two-story house in Denver, Colorado. The house had white siding that had faded in the sun, a narrow porch with shaky steps, and a roof that leaked every spring storm. It was not perfect, but it was the only home I had known since high school. I stood in the hallway surrounded by framed family photos, each one showing a version of us that felt far away from the people we had become. My mother leaned against the doorframe with her arms crossed. Her eyes were tired and sharp at the same time, like she had been waiting months to say what she finally said. She told me I had become a burden. It was blunt, quiet, and final. My father did not argue or soften her words. He simply pointed at the old brown suitcase sitting near the couch. They had already packed my things. I stared at the suitcase, then at them, hoping someone would look like they regretted this. No one did. My mother kept her arms folded. My father kept his eyes on the floor. I waited for one of them to say they did not mean it. I waited for a moment of softness, something that showed I still mattered. But the silence in the living room felt heavy, thick, and cold. It told me everything I needed to know. I had no energy left to argue. I had spent years trying to be enough, trying to prove I was worth keeping, and now it felt like all that effort had been pushed out with me. I picked up the suitcase and walked to the door. My hands felt numb. My legs felt weak. I tried not to shake. When I stepped outside, the cold Denver air hit my face. I heard the door close behind me before I even reached the sidewalk. They did not look out the window. They did not check if I needed help. They did not watch me go. In that moment, I understood that I had been holding on to something that had stopped holding on to me long ago. I walked to the bus stop with the suitcase dragging behind me. Cars drove past, people rushed by, and life moved as if nothing had happened. I sat on the bench and tried to breathe through the ache in my chest. I kept telling myself I was strong enough to handle this. I kept telling myself that maybe this was the beginning of something better. The words felt thin, like a weak thread trying to hold a whole heart together. I found a room to rent in Aurora, in an old house owned by a woman who barely spoke to me. The room was small with beige walls that needed paint and a window that looked out on a parking lot filled with cracks and oil stains. At night, the heater made loud clanging sounds that kept me awake. Still, it was mine. It was the first place where no one could throw me out. I put my suitcase in the corner, made my bed with cheap sheets, and sat there for a long time listening to the quiet. The loneliness felt sharp, but it also felt honest. Every morning, I walked to the car wash where I worked. It sat near Colfax Avenue, squeezed between a pawn shop and a small diner. I earned $14 an hour, and on slow days, even less. The work was tiring. I cleaned trucks and dusty SUVs, wiping mirrors and tires until my hands felt raw. Some customers ignored me, some complained about tiny spots of dirt, and some pretended I was invisible. Still, I kept smiling. I told myself that kindness was something I could control even when nothing else made sense. One afternoon, after a long rush of cars, I stood beside a black SUV, scrubbing the passenger door. The sun was dropping behind the buildings, turning everything into gold. My back ached. My shoes were soaked, but I kept working. That is when I noticed a man standing near me. He looked uncertain, almost nervous. His jacket had dust on the sleeves, and his hair was a little messy, like he had been driving for hours. He cleared his throat and spoke in a quiet voice. "I have no money." I paused, unsure if I heard him right. He repeated it softly, his cheeks slightly red, his eyes dropping to the ground. Something about him looked tired in a way I understood too well. I gave him a small smile and told him it was fine. I said he could pay another day or not at all. He seemed surprised by my reaction. Most people probably would have turned him away. I just finished the job and told him to have a good night. He thanked me in a gentle voice and left. I watched him drive off with the same dusty jacket and the same quiet look, never imagining that the man in that car would return the next day looking like a completely different person. I walked home that evening with the same routine as always. The wind felt cold, the sky felt wide, and my life felt small but steady. I had no idea that one small act of kindness would open a door I never expected to walk through. As I climbed the stairs to my rented room, I felt the usual weight settle on my shoulders, the same worries about money, the same fear about my future, the same ache from being unwanted by the people who were supposed to love me. I sat on my bed and rubbed my hands together to warm them. I thought about the man with the dusty jacket. I wondered why he had looked so embarrassed. I wondered if he would ever come back. I had no clue that he would return not as a man with empty pockets, but as someone who would change every corner of my life. I had no clue that the world was already shifting beneath my feet. I went to sleep believing tomorrow would be the same as today. I had no idea that tomorrow would be the beginning of everything. The next morning started like any other. I walked to the car wash with the same tired steps and the same quiet thoughts running in circles inside my mind. The sky was pale blue with thin streaks of clouds stretching across it. The air was cold enough to sting my fingers. I tried to shake the sadness from the night before, telling myself it was a new day, even though it felt exactly like the old ones. I clocked in, tied my apron, and grabbed my usual spray bottle, ready for another long shift. When I stepped outside, I froze. The same black SUV from yesterday was parked in front of the wash bay. Except this time it looked different. It was spotless, polished, and shining like it had just left a luxury showroom. The man who had looked dusty and embarrassed the day before stepped out of the car, but he was not the same man I remembered. His jacket was clean and expensive, the kind of fabric I had only seen in magazines. His hair was brushed neatly, his shoes were polished, and he carried himself with a confidence that did not match the quiet way he had spoken to me the day before. He smiled at me, and the smile felt warm and steady. I stood there holding my spray bottle, without knowing what to do. He walked closer and spoke in a calm voice. "My name is Daniel Warren," he said. "I came back because I owe you more than a payment." I blinked in confusion. Yesterday, he had looked like he could barely afford gas, let alone a full detail. Before I could ask anything, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. For a moment, I thought it was money, maybe a tip he felt guilty about not giving. But when he handed it to me, I saw my name written on the front. It was a letter. A simple handwritten letter in clean, steady handwriting. My hands trembled a little as I opened it. The words inside were gentle and thoughtful. He wrote that he had watched me work, watched how I treated people with kindness, even when they were rude or impatient. He wrote that most people walk past workers like me without seeing them, but I looked at people with something he had not seen in a long time. He wrote that he respected me for it. Then, near the end of the letter, he wrote that he wanted to see me again, if I was willing. When I looked up, his eyes were steady on mine. Before I could think of a proper response, he spoke again, this time with a deeper breath. "There is something else," he said. "Yesterday, I told you I had no money. That was true in the moment, but it was not the full truth." He paused, as if searching for the right words. My heart beat faster, trying to understand what he was trying to say. "I am a billionaire," he said softly. "I own real estate companies across America and Europe. I invest in hotels in Chicago, Boston, and London. I have businesses I rarely speak about. But none of that mattered yesterday. I did not have my wallet, and I wanted to see how people treated me when they thought I had nothing." My breath caught. The world seemed to tilt under my feet. I looked at him, trying to process the difference between the dusty man from yesterday and the confident man standing in front of me now. He took another step closer. "You showed kindness when I had nothing to offer. You did not judge me. You treated me like a person. That meant more to me than anything I own." I felt my throat tighten. I had spent so many years being overlooked, being pushed away, being made to feel like my kindness was weakness. Hearing him say it mattered felt unreal. Then, he said something I will never forget. "I want to know you, and if you let me, I want to marry you." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my hands. My first thought was that this must be a joke. My second thought was that life never gave me good things without taking something away. But his expression was calm, sincere, and steady. There was no joke in his eyes. I asked him why he would say something so big after knowing me for such a short time. He smiled in a gentle way that made the cold morning feel warm. People reveal who they are in small moments, he said. You showed me something real. I want to build a life with someone real. For a moment, I could not speak. All I could think about was the house I had been thrown out of, the parents who had pushed me away, the nights I cried into my pillow, wondering what would happen to me. And now here was a man telling me that he saw something in me worth choosing. He asked if he could take me to dinner that evening. I said yes, though my voice trembled. That night, we sat in a cozy restaurant near downtown Denver. We talked for hours. His life was big, full of boardrooms and private flights, but he spoke to me with the softness of someone who had learned how to value small things. He asked about my dreams. No one had asked me that in years. By the time he drove me home, my hands were still shaking. Not from fear, but from the feeling that something huge had shifted inside my life. Something I did not know how to name. By the end of that week, he asked me to meet him in a small park with tall pine trees. He knelt on one knee in the quiet grass, looked at me like I was something precious, and asked me to marry him. I said yes. My voice did not shake that time. 2 months after Daniel proposed, I moved into his home in Aspen, Colorado. Calling it a house never felt right because the word was too small for something so breathtaking. The first time I walked inside, I remember standing in the entryway, unable to move, unable to believe that the life in front of me belonged to the same girl who had left her parents' house with a suitcase and a broken heart. The place had tall glass walls that let in soft morning light, warm wood floors that felt smooth beneath my feet, and ceilings high enough to make me feel like I could finally breathe without shrinking myself. A wide balcony wrapped around the living room, giving a perfect view of the Rocky Mountains. At sunrise, the mountains glowed in soft pinks and oranges, a sight so calm it made my chest ache. The kitchen alone was bigger than the entire first floor of my parents' house in Denver. It had white marble counters, a long island with leather stools, and a stove that looked like it belonged in a cooking show. I jokingly told Daniel I had never even owned a pan that did not wobble, and he laughed as if he wanted to give me the whole world just to see me smile. The master bedroom had a wide balcony overlooking a thick forest of tall pine trees. When the wind blew, the trees swayed in a slow rhythm that made the whole view look alive. The place was worth nearly $9 million, but Daniel told me that to him, it was not the most important thing he owned. He told me I was. At first, I felt out of place in a home like that. I walked through the halls quietly, almost afraid to touch anything. But Daniel had a way of making everything feel natural. He bought me a silver Audi and surprised me with it in the driveway. The keys were in his hand, and he looked at me with a playful smile. I told him it was too much, too fancy, too unreal for someone like me. He shook his head and told me happiness is not too much, and that I did not need permission to receive good things. Hearing that felt strange because, for so long, I had been trained to feel guilty for wanting anything. Daniel encouraged me to enroll in business classes at a college nearby. I hesitated at first, afraid I would fail, or that I did not belong around students who came from better families and better schools. But he told me he believed in me. He said I had the kind of heart and work ethic that could turn a quiet life into a powerful one. It was the first time someone trusted my potential without making me earn it through pain. The weeks passed in a warm blur. I studied in the mornings, cleaned the house when I wanted to feel grounded, and cooked dinner sometimes, even though we had a housekeeper who could do it for us. I liked doing small things. They made me feel human in a life that was growing bigger every day. At night, Daniel and I would sit in the living room with a fireplace glowing softly. We talked about our pasts, our fears, our hopes. He always listened to me with full attention, like every word held weight. We planned our future slowly, not by rushing through ideas, but by imagining how peaceful life could be if we held on to each other. We began traveling whenever his work allowed. Our first trip together was to New York City. The city lights felt wild and alive, and although I had only seen places like Manhattan on television, walking down the streets beside him made me feel brave. He bought me a simple black dress one afternoon. It was not expensive compared to the things he could afford, but something about his choosing it with care made it feel priceless. In London, we walked across the Thames during sunset, and I bought a soft scarf from a small shop because I wanted something to remember the quiet moment. In Paris, he held my hand as if he were afraid the wind would carry me away. I never bought luxury items. I bought memories, simple things that made me feel connected to the new life I was stepping into. One night, after we returned from a trip, we sat beside the fireplace in Aspen with hot tea between us. The firelight made the room glow gold. Daniel watched the flames for a moment before turning to me. He said words that stayed in my heart longer than any sunrise or mountain view. He told me that my parents had pushed me out, not because I was weak or not enough, but because they never saw my value. He said losing me had been their loss, not mine. He said I had been meant for more all along. Hearing that broke something open in me. All the pain I had carried from the moment my mother and father closed their door behind me came rushing back, but this time it did not feel like a wound. It felt like the beginning of understanding. I realized that the day they threw me out had not been the end of my life, but the turning point. I had walked into darkness without knowing that a better world was waiting for me, a world filled with a kind of love I had never known. For the first time since childhood, I felt safe. I felt seen. I felt wanted without needing to earn it with sacrifice. I felt like someone had finally opened a door I did not know existed. And as I sat there with Daniel beside me, watching the fire flicker softly against the glass walls, I realized that sometimes losing the people who hurt you is the only way to find the life you are meant to live. My parents found out about my marriage the same way they found out about most things in my life. Through other people. They had never called to check on me, never asked where I was living, never wondered if I had food or heat or anything close to comfort. They made peace with the idea that I had vanished from their world. But when the news reached them that I had married a wealthy man in Aspen, their silence suddenly cracked open. It was almost funny, in a sad way, how quickly curiosity replaces neglect when money is involved. It happened on a quiet Saturday afternoon. The sun was warm against the tall glass walls, and I was arranging a bouquet of white roses on the dining table. Daniel had stepped out to take a call from his office in Chicago. The house was peaceful, the kind of peace I had always wanted but never thought I would find. Then the intercom rang, breaking the stillness with a sharp chime. I walked toward the wall panel and tapped the screen. The gate camera came into view. When I saw who was standing outside our front gate, my breath caught in my throat. My mother and father, both of them, standing on the stone walkway with stiff shoulders and uncertain expressions. My mother clutched her purse with trembling fingers. My father kept adjusting the sleeves of his jacket like he did when he was nervous. I had not seen their faces in almost a year, not since the day they pushed me out of their Denver home without a second thought. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at them through the camera. A younger version of me would have run outside immediately, desperate to be wanted. But I had grown since then. Life had carved new strength into me. So instead of rushing to the door, I took a slow breath and stepped outside with calm steps, letting the massive oak door close behind me. The afternoon air was clean and cool. I walked across the top step and stopped where the stone met the sunlight. My parents stared up at me with eyes I barely recognized. My mother's eyes filled with tears the moment she saw me. My father looked smaller than I remembered, like time had finally caught up with the weight of the choices he had made. My mother spoke first. Her voice cracked before she got the first word out. "We are sorry," she said. "We made a mistake. Please forgive us." The words floated in the air between us, but for some reason, they felt thin, almost weightless, as if they were trying to erase things that could not be erased with a single apology. I waited, not because I needed time, but because I wanted to hear the truth behind their sudden regret. Apologies can come from guilt, fear, or loss. I needed to know which one it was. My father took a step forward and cleared his throat, the same way he did when he used to lecture me about responsibilities. But this time his voice was softer, almost ashamed. "We did not know you would become someone important." There it was. The truth spoken without hesitation. Not that they missed me. Not that they regretted hurting me. They regretted losing access to what I had become. Those words landed deeper than anything my mother had said. It was the same truth that had always lived in their hearts. They valued success more than love. They praised money more than kindness. They cared about status more than their own daughter. Behind me, through the glass walls of the house, they could see everything. The wide living room, the tall ceilings, the polished floor, the hints of a life they never imagined I would have. They saw the proof that I had risen without them. And the look in their eyes told me they resented that truth as much as they admired it. A long silence stretched between us. I felt no anger rising inside me. I felt no desire to shout or blame them. I also felt no joy at their return. I felt something calmer, something stronger. It was the soft, steady feeling of a person who had learned to choose peace. I moved on. I said quietly, "You did not want me when I had nothing. Now I do not want you." My mother's face crumpled. Her tears spilled over. My father dropped his gaze to the ground. He tried to speak again, maybe to defend himself or to soften the damage, but I had heard everything I needed. They had come not because they loved me, but because they loved the idea of me now. My mother reached out a hand as if touching me could pull back the years, but I stepped back. She whispered my name, but the sound felt distant, like something from another lifetime. Their apologies were late, and late apologies cannot heal wounds that were never acknowledged when they mattered. I turned and walked back toward the house. I did not run. I did not rush. I walked with the kind of calm that comes from healing yourself without anyone's help. When I stepped inside, the oak door shut behind me with a soft thud that felt like the closing of an old chapter. Daniel met me halfway across the living room. His face held concern as he gently placed his hands on my shoulders. "Are you all right?" he asked in a soft voice. "I am," I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it. He pulled me into a warm embrace, and the home around us felt like shelter. That moment reminded me that the life I had now was not born from luck or money. It grew from kindness, from faith, from the simple act of smiling at a stranger who had walked into a car wash pretending to have nothing. Standing there in Daniel's arms, I realized something deep and steady. Sometimes the world does not forget the goodness you give. Sometimes it brings it back to you in ways you never imagined, carrying you into a life you once believed was too far to reach. And that life was now mine.